All right, everyone, just give me 1 second to share my screen. Can everyone see this? Great. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Ben Demers. I'm an economic development planner with the City of Somerville. Welcome to the April 25th meeting of the Gilman Square Civic Advisory Committee meeting. A quick note on the technology before we hop into the agenda. So this meeting is being conducted remotely using Zoom webinar. Across city meetings, in order to comply with open meeting law under state guidance, which does not allow for what is called side conversation, the chat function amongst attendees this evening has been disabled. If you as an attendee have a question or would like to make a comment on any of the matters discussed this evening, please raise your hand. You can use the raise hand function in Zoom to indicate that you would like to speak, and I will call on you one by one. And I just ask that anyone who's making comment this evening just keeps that comment to about 3 minutes maximum. So let's review the agenda for this evening's meeting. So we're going to start with a roll call and approval of previous meeting summaries. In this case, just one summary. We'll then have a public comment period, which we have at the start of every CAC meeting. We usually keep that public comment a bit shorter, but want to have a space if there's anything super pressing. We'll then have an update on temporary programming in Gilman Square on city-owned land. And we are joined this evening by Culture House to talk more about that topic. We'll then have a check-in regarding the discussion of urban renewal in Gilman Square. So this is not as deep of a discussion as we had last time or as we were planning to have in May, but mostly want to give a space if there are any questions that people want to make sure we're preparing to talk about in that May meeting. We'll then leave a space for neighborhood updates from CAC members. And then we'll have a second public comment period, and then we will adjourn. Okay. And I do actually want to note that if any members of the public, if you have comments or questions about the topics that we're discussing this evening as we're discussing them, please feel welcome to raise your hand outside of those public comment periods. I'm just going to check attendees quickly to see if we have any members of the public with us. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I will now do a roll call vote of CAC members in attendance this evening. So when I call your name, please just unmute and say here. Diana?
Here.
I'm just going to note as we go. Melinda?
Here.
Rom?
Here.
Casey? Jack? Okay. Sorry. Lisa? Okay. Jamie?
Here.
Awesome. Jennifer?
Here.
Brittany is not here this evening. Michelle?
Here.
Ben? Elgart?
He might have got kicked out. I saw it. It said he left, but it probably wasn't intentional. Maybe his connection's
Let me
bad.
see if he is still. So I see that he is called in. Okay, I might just be checking my email a bit to troubleshoot. I will mark him as in attendance for now. Councilor Klingon?
Present.
And then Councilor Ewan Campen? Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. And I'll remind members of the CAC and the public that the CAC operates by noting points of consensus and also non-consensus on any topic versus some other sort of more official voting based on quorum boards within the city. Ahead of tonight's meeting, I had also shared with CAC members the meeting summary from the March 2023 CAC meeting. So at these meetings, we generally will review, note if there are any edits, and then accept so that they can be posted to the website. So just want to ask, have CAC members had a chance to review that meeting summary, and do you have any notes or updates that you would like made?
I didn't see a March summary. I saw like, from last July and last October, and then from January. And then the
So
agenda for March, maybe I'll look at the one email. I'm looking at the
So-
wrong-
So that should have been the email for the March meeting, had those 3 agendas. The most recent one should have had the updated agenda. That's good to know if that did not go out properly. Did anyone else receive the meeting with the agenda for this and then the March meeting summary?
I received it.
Okay.
I got that too, yeah.
Did anyone who had a chance to review have any comments, or are we good to accept? Well, I'm seeing general nodding. I can't see the grid currently. Give me 1 second. It's always the awkward thing about sharing a screen on Zoom. Okay. Sounds good. So we'll accept the meeting summary. Okay. With that, I will shift us into the first public comment period. So again, this public comment period is a little bit shorter, and it really just gives a space if anybody has anything pressing that they would like to share. Are there any members of the public who would like to share anything up top? And we have 1 member of the public in attendance this evening, so I'll just give, 20 seconds to see if they raise their hand. Okay. I am not seeing any hand being raised. So with that, I will shift us into our first more substantive item this evening, which is an update on temporary programming in Gilman Square on city-owned land. So as a reminder for anyone watching, the city owns 2 parcels of land within Gilman Square. So one of those is 350 Medford Street, also known as the Homans lot, which is the gravel lot that's adjacent to the mobile station at School in Medford Street. And then there's also the triangular green space at the intersection of Medford and Pearl Streets. So the Economic Development Division, which myself and Rachel are in, has received ARPA funding to bring a temporary activation to some combination of those spaces through September 2024. And we've hired a Somerville-based placemaking and design firm, Culture House, to really lead that work. So we're joined this evening again by Rishika Dewan, who's the community manager at Culture House, who's going to be presenting this evening about current design considerations and also getting some feedback on programming. So I'm going to pass things over to Rishika.
Thank you. I think I need permission to share my screen.
Let me give you that. Okay, you should have the ability now.
Great. Awesome. So yeah, like Ben mentioned, I am Rishka, the community manager at Culture House. And over the last month, since the last time I was at this meeting, we've kind of been taking more ideas of what people want to see happen in this space and starting to design out what this activation is going to look like. So we have a very general concept that we are working off of now. And we are focusing a lot more on the Homan site and using the Triangular Park more as kind of overflow space, hangout space, and just because of the incline of that site, it'll be hard to do a lot of programming. But we are still thinking of that plot of land, but here is more the area that we do need to design out and think a little bit more. And sorry. Just to share generally some inspiration that we have been taking. So one of the big ones is Starlight Square in Cambridge. This is a lot more small scale than this, but kind of looking at this temporary activation, this fun space to hang out, just having a lot of programming, a lot of like a lot of meetups over like food and music. And then something like this as well, more kind of on the design side of using scaffolding, again, giving more of a temporary structure for people to hang out in, having a shaded space. It is going to be hot out. And then also this area of just like fun games that people can use even outside of any events that might be happening in the space during the 3 months that will be open. So this is just kind of where we started from. And this is just more background about what Ben mentioned is the sites that we're going to be at. This is also showing more details on where we will be on the site. So the teacher parking and the parking lot there is going to stay. We will be in this area next to it. And there is a back part of it that is snow storage and storage in general. That we will not be able to use. So essentially the fence from the front is going to be pushed back here and we'll have this open space. And I will go through some general design options that we've been looking at and would love your feedback on that. So one is just looking at basic infrastructure that is going to be on the site. We recently had a conversation internally as well about ground cover. And we will no longer be using turf. I apologize if this hasn't been updated, but we will not be using this just due to environmental concerns on the material of turf as well as disposing of it. So we are looking at different options and I'll be able to, we'll be sharing that with the city in the next week or so that in our next meeting, I'll be able to update you more on that. But outside of that, we will have a generator for electricity in the space. We will have restrooms. So we're looking at accessible and standard restrooms, as well as hand wash stations. And then, of course, like storage space on the site too. So these are just general infrastructure things that we will have on the site at all times. On top of that, kind of looking at what are the kind of activities that we are seeing in the space. So definitely food has been one of the things that we've heard a lot of. So really looking at benches and table seating. So maybe something within scaffolding, generally benches where people can also hang out and use the space outside of any other kind of programming, and then picnic tables. So looking at a mixture of things that are fixed and things like picnic tables that can be moved around and used as you might need to. And then outdoor living room, like we again hearing from you all about having more of a hangout space within the neighborhood itself. So looking at fun like outdoor couches, scaffolding with hammocks on them, and then pergolas. So just creating that living room feel, as we like to call it at Culture House. The next is enclosures. So these are all just examples. I'll show more about where we've landed, but looking at some kind of closed space as well. So material options being inflatables, some geometric domes, and then shipping containers. And then entertainment space. So whether we want to have a large stage there, having activities outside of programming. So working on having lawn games there. And then also at possibly using scaffolding for art displays, or maybe also thinking of a history of Gilman Square, just a place that we can put up information as well as a shaded space too. And then of course, in terms of food and beverage, we are looking at, how can we put together a beer garden? How can we have food trucks in the space? What does that look like? And seating around that and how we can bring together in a space like that. So I will just kind of explain now more 3 different layouts that we have been working with. And they all kind of cover what I've explained in terms of these different areas of seating, entertainment, vending, an enclosed space, and a living room, more hangout space. So the first option is what we're calling the yard. So really focusing more on food and beverage and creating that space for people to use that. And then having kind of more outdoor play areas. So having more areas where people can hang out, can play games, and kind of focusing on more of that gathering space over food and games. And then we have the shell. So this is more centered around music and arts. So this is having kind of various open spaces that you can use in the middle. You can sit on benches, just kind of lounging, but then also having dedicated areas for a stage having kind of a dedicated, living room space, and then pergolas, and just kind of working more with shaded structures across the area. And then the den, this is the last one that we have, and this is more focusing on kind of trying a way to put all of this together in one space. So really creating these separate like areas that people can walk through and use. So kind of having picnic tables, having food trucks, having, art exhibit areas, having a beer garden, having the living room, and having kind of this more shaded, more secluded space as well. And then working with kind of having different kinds of structures within one space. I'm going to stop sharing. But yeah, that's kind of where we are at with the design. Would love any thoughts, or Ben, I don't know how you want to do questions or.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly curious to hear people's initial responses to any aspects of the design. And then over the next couple of weeks, going to be sort of finalizing that design. So yeah, just curious to hear things that are standing out as positive, things that you're like feeling less drawn to. I have some specific questions, but I'm kind of curious to hear initial response first.
I have a specific question. What is the timeline? Can you just remind me of what the timeline is going to be for the pop-up?
Yeah, so the goal is to finish the design over the next few weeks, and then go through permitting process with the city, and then be able to do construction by early June. That is our goal currently. And Culture House is working very hard to keep us on that schedule. And then the space would ideally be open from like mid-June through mid-September. And then ARPA funding needs to be used by the end of September. So that is when we're looking to end the programming.
So just a follow-up question on that. If it's going to be open until September, the teachers' parking lot wouldn't really be used except for the month of September. Would there be any way that we could use it for part of that time?
So I will say, I know that it's noted as teacher parking. It is technically teacher and staff overflow parking. If there is ever time, such as on a weekend, where we don't see teachers or staff using it, and there's a specific type of programming that could use more space, I think we could definitely consider making use of it, but it's used actively enough, from my understanding, even during the summer by staff, that when thinking about the design aspect of it, we haven't been as focused on that area.
Okay, only if I've never seen it used in the summertime. I walk by it every day, but okay. I just wanted to.
Heard. I think that's a good point, that we should keep that in mind as we're thinking about programming that might need more space.
Right.
But the other thing is also that there is some, like, we probably won't be doing as much treatment or covering to that area. So if that is a concern for any type of programming, then would likely not base it there.
Oh, thank you.
Ben, I see your hand next. But also might be having tech difficulties. Do we want to go to Deanna and then we can come back?
Sorry, I was double muted.
All good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. So Ben Elgar, him. It was really great seeing the layouts and the different information, different ideas that went into creating those spaces. One of the things that I think we saw in earlier research is, and I say research, but also ideation, was that we really want to have a lot of versatility in the spaces. Everything from how can we open up City Hall into the space, overflow City Hall space, and not just entertainment space. And then also, I think we have fundamental questions on we want to build community outside of it. So,
Ben, the audio's getting a little bit scratchy.
Hopefully you heard what I was saying. The two examples I had was that we heard about the idea of bringing civic activity out of City Hall and bringing it to open space, or at least into the Hillman area. And then also the idea that we could that building community is beyond entertainment. So we want to make sure that have spaces to do those kinds of exercises and gain learning in those areas. So I think layouts that are conducive to that kind of flexibility are probably going to be able to cover kind of the breadth that we want to cover in the programming to tease out some of those fundamental questions that we have. I think those were that was kind of the guidance I wanted to offer and kind of the thinking I'm looking forward to. I think most of what I also hope to see is more conversation around that during the programming. One thing I didn't see is how the big questions that we want answered through this activation can be supported with the layout. We didn't have a great visibility in CAC to, I think, the RFP. So I think it'd be great to hear in these presentations how these layouts are addressing some of the thoughts from the audience.
Right. I will be honest, I missed some of the audio there. Can you re-say like the last two sentences you said? I heard you say RFP, but just.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying that I don't know that we got great visibility into how Culture House was answering the RFP. We certainly didn't hear how the layouts are responding to information in the RFP. So I think just knowing that in this conversation, but also in ongoing presentations, that we just hear how the layouts and programming is responding to that RFP could be really helpful for knowing that these design recommendations are executing against their goals.
Okay, and when you mean you mean the RFP for long-term development, like testing out some of the ideas and things we want to know for that RFP?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood. And when you mentioned one other question I want to ask back is you mentioned flexibility for civic uses, sort of like that overflow from City Hall. And so I know that I've heard that idea referenced a little bit. I think we're trying to think about like what the actual space needs for that would be. I'm just curious if you have any like specific examples that you want to make sure are reflected in infrastructure.
I appreciate you asking. No, I don't. I mean, I think one of the, I think we'd want to think, to answer that, I think we'd want to understand what are the barriers for people going into City Hall, and then think about how can we reduce those barriers by being outside of that space. So could everything from being casual, like the living room, might be a better, more conducive space to get answers than an older building that seems very formal. So even that could be better, but I think people in City Hall might have a better, like you, might have a better idea of what keeps people from coming in.
Sure. Yeah, I think I guess, and part of what I was asked, like, it raises the question of what sort of specific functions that one gets in City Hall would make the most sense in a space that is flexible like this. But I think that's a good question for us to keep thinking about. And if there's especially ways that City Hall provides information, if that's something that we could make available within this space.
Yeah, I think the most obvious would be billboards of information that you could learn. I think it'd be a lot more exciting to think about how people in City Hall, and I know you do a lot of activity that's outside of those walls, but how you oftentimes people who are still really motivated by specific goals of coming together, how maybe a casual space might change things up and make it easier to learn or to share feedback.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. Different departments do things like office hours, and I wonder if it's worthwhile asking different divisions that do that if they would be interested in something in person in a space like this.
Amazing, that'd be great.
Deanna?
Hi, yeah, I'm excited to hear about all the options for the site, and I had just a few specific questions. I know one of the areas is labeled snow storage. I'm assuming you don't mean only snow storage, because otherwise it seems like we could use it in the summertime and have more space.
So snow storage has been like my shorthand on that. It is general DPW storage space. And like having the space be versatile enough to like switch between seasons has been It's just been more logistically difficult. So it's made it hard to, I think that is kind of the obvious thing is when seeing that is like, if there's going to be no snow there during a large chunk of the year, then couldn't we use it? But keeping that space versatile is difficult. And there is other storage needs from DPW that they wanted to keep that space reserved for. And obviously we've talked a bit about this in the past, but this is really in the context of DPW has very tight space availability in the city. And so we often have to be a bit creative in allowing them to have storage space. And so they do some storage at 90 Washington Street, for instance, but it's often locations that are changing from year to year. But yeah, heard on that.
Okay, so then they would need to be able to have active access all the time, maybe to the back of the lot. And
So they, yeah. Oh, sorry.
By going through this temporary programming space.
So their access to the site is through the back of the teacher parking lot. So they wouldn't need to come through the temporary activation.
Okay, cool. And then I was wondering, you mentioned a generator here. I find that generators are usually very smelly and noisy, and especially when you have food or music, not very desirable. And I wonder whether the city can, surely there's some way to tap into the electricity at a pole nearby. Maybe that's too complicated. Just thought it would be nice not to have a generator running there. And then I'm wondering, is there any thought given to like evening lighting, and then what are the general hours of this? I would love to have food trucks or a beer garden would be amazing. I don't know if that's allowed like with licenses and everything, but to have them both at lunchtime on a weekday and then also in the evening, like all the time, 7 days a week, that would be awesome. I don't know what the thought is for the operating hours of this thing, but some nice lighting or string lights or something in the evening, or maybe you don't need it because it's late in the summer, but I'd love to hear more about that. And I don't know if we're going to be able to see some more kind of specific concept plans in the May meeting, or if they just proceed with Culture House just proceeds with working it out. I guess that's okay too, but it's a little hard to visualize with just the bubble diagrams.
In terms of the generator, so heard about that concern there. We had asked DPW about this, and it seems like there is not a way, there is no electrical hookup on the site. So we are aware that obviously the trade-off of that is that a generator is noisy and yes, it can be smelly. And so trying to like weigh if we get a lot of feedback on that, like trying to be flexible if that's something we hear. But currently, if we want to have an electric hookup, this is kind of the only option that has been made available to us. But definitely heard on the concern. In terms of evening lighting, things like that, I do think that is something we're talking more about. Rishka, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but in terms of like the hours of the space, we've been talking more about, having something from like early mid-afternoon into the evening, since evening is probably a lot of the time when people are going to be using this space, but we also want it to be available for high school students as they're ending their school day. I know this is also, a lot of it is after the school year, but just like having something that is available probably during those times into the evening. I don't think we're going to be able to do, in terms of like active programming, having something available 7 days a week. Like, I just don't think we have the budget in terms of staffing, but also thinking about parts of the space that are going to be more like passively available rather than being actively programmed. Yeah, Rishka, I don't know if you want to mention anything on lighting.
Yeah, I can, I know this is something we're still working through, but with the generator, one of the things we have been thinking about as well is just making it more available when there is programming that needs it. So trying to see if that's something that, it's with the noise and the smell as well. So that's one of the things we're thinking of. With the lighting, yes, we are working on that. We're looking into like solar options. We use that a lot in spaces that we've done outdoors, and they've been really great. So looking at using those as one of the options. And then in terms of programming, and operating hours, this space will always be open for anyone to use. But in terms of having a specific event and having us planning a program in this space, we are looking at kind of Wednesdays to Sundays, and 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. is usually the times we look at. And like Ben mentioned, it's very much just like us having staff there to be able to oversee and program and manage that. But outside of that, it's a public space. There's going to be all the chairs, benches, you can still sit, gather, have your lunch there. It's still a space that's available to you outside of that too.
Yeah, I mean, if, I don't know how it works with food trucks, if they feel that they can make a profit being there every day, if it's possible for a food truck to just be there every day, for example, at lunchtime. I mean, I don't know. I know I work at home and a lot of people work at home and there's not a lot of places to eat around here during the daytime, so. Love to have that
City
during the day.
staff are like very excited for that concept also. Yeah, I do also want to note that you had made so I know like in terms of seeing detailed drawings and things at each level, like because of how tight the design timeline is on this in order to get something activated to have like a long enough time to use it. The next time that we're coming back together in May will probably be around the time that Culture House is starting installation of a space. And so it would be like a design would already be set at that point. Obviously, if there are more comments, like we can talk about other ways of engagement, but kind of trying to keep things moving as much as possible and getting engagement where we can and responding to it. Yeah, obviously in a more ideal scenario, we could have had more of these meetings to show kind of the design as it progressed.
Okay, thank you.
Ron? You're muted.
Yeah, my main question was the same as Diana's, the hours of space. So I guess it's going to be open pretty much all the time, but this programming will be at specific times. In terms of the food trucks, there's lunch and there's dinner, but there's also, I was thinking like there could be a coffee truck or like a breakfast truck because one of the uses for the space that came up a lot in the early meetings was having a coffee space there. And so maybe a morning truck would be a good idea. I think that's mainly what I wanted to say was the hours of space. And would the lawn games be open all the time?
I think feasibly, yes. Rishika, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that. I think that would be an aspect of the public space. If there's any like specific element, I mean, to be honest, we haven't gotten deep into the logistics of the lawn game conversation. So if there's any like elements that need to be put away or anything like that, we could talk about that. But I think ideally they would be available at any time.
I just
And I
want
will
to say
say,
those choices look great. And are we supposed to choose between the three options that were presented? Are we going to talk about?
I think the idea is mostly like having different things to respond to.
Yeah.
And then like being able to take that feedback into a finalized design. But if any of them particularly stand out, like really that seems like the most important use, then please feel welcome to share that. But I'll say, oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's it for me. Yeah.
I'll say also on the hour front, like obviously we're trying to be like aware of any staff limitations on this, but also if you have any thoughts about hours, like I appreciate asking what the thought has been so far in it. But if you're also like, would love to make sure that we have these sorts of hours considered, then please also feel welcome to give that feedback.
And the staffing will be a combination of Culture House as well as city personnel, or is it?
So the majority of staffing in terms of like managing the event space, that's really looking to Culture House. There's going to be support from the Department of Public Works in terms of maintenance of the space, but that's like less of a programming focus. But then Culture House, yeah, will be kind of partnering with other organizations to bring events and things like that. Jamie?
This will probably sound really repetitive now, but I was originally wondering about the hours and yes, a big fan of anything. I mean, one technically is lunchtime, but yes, big fan of anything as someone that doesn't quite live in Gilman but works there with a lot of people that do. Yeah, lunch and coffee, like something like that that's easy, quick, a nice meeting space. Sounds really appealing.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing from multiple people like the desire for food options maybe outside of those 1 to 8 hours. And so if that can happen outside of the like official programming, we could talk about that and sort of what supervision or management is needed for any food options. Cool. Counselor Klingon?
Yeah, thank you. Super, it's very exciting. Just a couple things based on some of the questions and comments people are making. Like the type of top we put down, if you will, like on the ground. Is that kind of, so I would imagine, like I'd like to see grass go there myself, but you know, even if we were just able to throw down whatever 6 to 12 inches of soil and facade, but I imagine that that would affect food trucks being able, like, you know, we wouldn't necessarily want to pull food trucks right onto grass. Is there a way to sort of like play out the area where we could sort of have a, you know, a space that would make sense for food trucks or any type of, you know, driving in?
Yeah, so I think we're focusing on food truck. Also, Rishika, I know I'm answering a lot of these directly, but please feel welcome to stop me or jump in. We're focusing on a lot of food truck options because of where the curb cut is located to allow access to the teacher and staff overflow parking. The access point, that'll be the access point for the for any food trucks. And so we're probably looking to that western edge of the site, like along the teacher parking, to have a space for the trucks for any like food option to go. And so less concerned necessarily about like driving over any of the rest of the installation. In terms of grass and the idea of 6 to 12 inches of like dirt or sod, it is a costly option. And so we are trying to weigh the cost of that option and the needs for long-term maintenance on that site. That it is, we have obviously heard a desire for this kind of like for grass or for sod.
Yeah, well, let me
Sorry,
tell you why. For 2 reasons. Well, no, it's something that you said. I heard you mention really quick something about covering, and I didn't know if you meant like the fences, because I mean, obviously it'd be great to have some sort of beautifying thing along the, you know, where the mobile is or whatever. But furthermore, you know, this is going to be from June to September. It's basically going to be the hottest 3 months. I don't know if we have in the budget a way to give some sort of respite from the sun, like a few of those, you know, those big square things that they kind of, you know, it's like screen or whatever they use. It seems
Right.
like fairly cheap to, you know, they put them over park structures nowadays. So between, you know, the grass and that, I think it would make it much more usable when it comes to the summertime when we're talking about sitting out there. You know, sitting out there in the middle of July, it's going to be pretty brutal if we don't have some sort of respite from the sun. But yeah, I love it. Sorry.
No, please.
No, I just something to think about. And I love the idea of, you know, the hours, and so that the high school kids can come down and hang out down there. And, you know, certainly we want it to be multi-generational. And then of course, all the people getting out for tea, hopefully, you know, there's things to draw them in. And it sounds like we have a really great opportunity to activate an exciting space. So happy with what I'm hearing so far. You know, I think there's some tweaks that, you know, hopefully they'll bring back to the team. And if we can, you know, get some of these little concerns that we all have addressed. But yeah, so far so good.
Definitely. And Rachel, I see your hand is up. I just want to quickly, I know Culture House is looking into shading structure, so shade and sun exposure is definitely something we were thinking of in this space. So yeah, but thank you for that comment, Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I'm sorry about my voice, go a little deeper on the surface material challenge that we are facing. And maybe Rishika, you can talk a little bit about, or Ben, maybe jump into here. The challenge we have is that we are trying to activate a site that is currently gravel, and we need to find a surface material that works from an accessibility perspective, and we can get installed in time to start, and we can maintain through the season. The challenge that we have with anything grass is that it's growing, and therefore it needs the subsurface layers, and it becomes something that we wouldn't be able to actually realistically pull off in the time necessary to actually get it installed, or do we actually have a maintenance ability over the course of the year to do, like over the course of that 3 months, to do mowing, watering, all that. Like those are the amount of investment that is necessary to make the plants survive, even though it seems relatively simple, as it actually is it's basically infeasible in the course of this season. If we were talking about something that we were able to really invest in knowing we were going to be using it a year from now, that might be something that we could dig into, but we just, it's not going to be a feasible option for this year. So that took us to the, what about the artificial option? But that has its own serious drawbacks. And so we've come to the conclusion that it really can't be either of those things. And so we are trying to find what then is our alternative choice that still allows us to move forward. And so we've set the Culture House a really tricky challenge. And that's one of the things that we've kind of come to the conclusion on, is that, like, if we had been starting with a paved lot, we'd be in a lot easier of a place to think about what alternatives we could be at. But paving also, we figured out very early on, wouldn't be feasible to pave this whole section, because there's all these other knock-on effects. So we're trying to find out what that temporary solution is that gets us the best possible route forward.
I appreciate that, Rachel. I just would say that, you know, that some of the things you mentioned, including accessibility of that, you know, as far as grass and people being able to maneuver on grass, if you could just, you know, it's great to hear it here, but I don't know, I think, I've heard it from a number of community, people in the community, so I don't know if we just want to have like an official, like, response to the question of grass. You know, something that kind of lays it out, as you know, I'm sure everything, you know, there's always people in the private sector who certainly see things being a lot easier than they may be under, you know, government restraints. But and the reason I say that is because, you know, even from it would seem like, you know, I would ask, what is so impossible? I heard you say different things, but I guess the pieces that are missing are, like, is it like procurement? Like, what is the, you know, what are the pieces that the public wouldn't necessarily understand in terms of getting those materials and getting a contractor lined up? Like, we wouldn't have to, if it was through Culture House, we wouldn't have to do like an RFP or anything like that, right? Like, they could
No,
have
it's really not a procurement issue. It's a technically feasible issue, right? That, like, we're dealing with already starting out a gravel place. So in order to get to the place where we then have grass on top of it, we would need to build up the soil so that there's enough soil for the grass to make it. It's not quite as simple as just rolling out a carpet. From a plant manage, like, how do you put these plants out there in the world? So that's one there's a technical feasibility layer of how do we actually make that happen, that we can't seem to navigate how to solve. The other layer is that we've been very cautious here about like capping, because we don't know the soil conditions below this gravel. And so we're trying to create a barrier there that we are, you know, again, being respectful of, we don't know what that's going to look like. So then we have the layer of, okay, now we have to figure out how we actually do that in a safe way. Then we have to add in all right, now we need to water this, which means that we would need to contract, DPW would be in charge of taking on that responsibility of watering this grass, mowing this grass. We don't have any of that sort of layers built in. And so it ends up being something that is not feasible for a 3-month period.
Okay, like I said, I you know, there's always varying opinions, so I think it's important just to kind of, but anyway. All right, well, you know,
Would it be the dream?
that's fine.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would certainly be nice. I mean, I don't know, I just imagine like 12 inches of soil should be able to sustain, you know, if you roll out some sod. And then what, but anyway, like I said, it's just something to think about, and like I said, think about some sort of response. I know the mayor loves grass over turf for sure, but yeah, just thank you for answering that. I'm sure there'll be, you know, more discussion on it, but all right.
Yeah, I see okay, Melinda, I know you have your hand up. There's also a member of the public who I think is going to want to talk about the grass issue specifically, but Melinda, I want to hear from you first.
Sure. Can you hear me? Because I know
Yes.
Okay. So I was just curious, Palashika, I thought I heard at the last meeting that I was going to see people with clipboards around asking for input from the public. I'm not there often, but I didn't see anybody. So I was just wondering if you had an opportunity to do that. And I was also thinking that if you haven't yet, it would be good to do it in the coming weeks, because I think it will also, get people excited and let them know what's coming.
I can, Ben, is it okay if I? We've just kind of internally, we have been looking at the design to start with, just in terms of the short timeline and having to procure kind of large materials for the site. But I have reached out to a lot of people to start with over email. But over the next week, it's starting May, you will see me everywhere. I will also be at the Open Studios at Oyster Studios on May 4th. So that's kind of the one first event that you will see me at, but you will definitely see me all over. You'll start seeing posters, flyers. We made an announcement about the project last week and have got a lot of people reaching out from residents from the neighborhood as well. So we're kind of slowing into that, but starting next week, you definitely will see me there.
Where was the announcement?
It was mostly on our Instagram, Facebook, and social media, and our general Culture House newsletter. But please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to share more information in different ways. And if there's another way that you feel is best for you to get information, I'm happy to put that in a rotation and share it there as well.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Ben, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't think I'd want to speak to the ground cover, but now I'm feeling compelled to. I think that even if it's dead grass, people would rather see grass there than anything else. I mean, we don't want synthetic materials. We don't want substitutions. Sure, it would be nice if it was nicely landscaped, but part of it is just capping it, and capping with natural materials is much better than other things. I'm not quite sure what else we can do to achieve that. And I think we also realize that whatever we do, even if it's a ground cover, it might extend beyond 3 months if nothing is there to replace it. So I think that there is some other consideration about, how is this temporary activation going to impact our the long-term presence of this site in our neighborhood. And so I just think that there can be more thinking around that in order to make sure that, we see this opportunity as best we can.
Yeah.
Regarding, I'm gonna double stack. The other thing that I think we heard around time of activation, right now, I don't think we have a good handle on, what people might be doing in the neighborhood in the evening or at night, and why people might want to come to gather, and how we can get them to gather here rather than in other parts of the city or other cities nearby cities. So I would also really press to think about how, whether it's through lighting or through activation at different times of day, that we're very intentional about thinking about how can people be on site. I'd rather have less consistency over time and more what's happening at 5 in the morning, who's out at 5 in the morning, versus who's coming by at 2 a.m. And then of course during daylight hours. But I think it's really important to know around the clock what's going on, because I don't think we have a handle on that in other places, and we definitely want to make sure, I think while we know it's quiet at night and in the early morning, I think we really do think of ourselves as, a community that has people engaging at all times of day. And so I think it's important to know how we can meaningfully engage people during, around the clock.
Sure.
And across the weekend too. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate your focus on making sure we're learning something through the activation for the long-term development. We'll always have to weigh the changing hours and things like that. We'll always have to weigh it with staffing realities at the individual times, but very much heard. And I think that is something we can explore more, is how we would be collecting data at times outside of when this is open. And then on the ground cover piece, I mean, definitely have heard this feedback. This is something that we are continuing to talk about, and it's not we're hearing it and we're trying to talk about feasibility internally. It's just getting an answer on some of these things in a quick turnaround when trying to have like the design ready in a time to have the space open is hard. But we very much are hearing the feedback and trying to figure out things that meet the needs that we are hearing. And I see there is an attendee's hand up. So Matt Carlino, I'm gonna unmute you.
Hey everyone. Hey Ben. Thanks for
Hey, Matt.
hosting this meeting. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to try to resolve some of Rachel's concerns about putting soil and sod down. The current site, even if you were to just put a rug, would fail ADA compliance because it's very lumpy and it fills with water after it rains. So it's not like an easy overlay cover is a suitable option either. We explored a couple different options for covers, whether it was wood chips or grass with soil underneath it. You're really looking at somewhere around like $2 to $2.50 a square foot for like a realistic material cost, with a little bit more for installation. To solve ADA accessibility, you could have some areas grassed. You can drive the food trucks and put the stage on wood chips. And then you could really build like a nice stone dust path because you've built up the site with your grass cover. So if you're going to build up 6 to 12 inches, that gives you enough room to actually put down like a nice stone dust path. And if you like imagine like that looking like a semicircle kind of going from the road into the site and with a start and an exit, you can actually make for the most part of it accessible. I want to echo Ben's point that like a dead lawn in this area would be a significant improvement over the gravel wasteland that we've been living with. And we're not looking for a golf course. We're not looking for something that's perfect. We have committed that we will overseed it once this fall season is over. We get enough rain here. This is something that Stephen Nutter and I chatted about a lot, was will the sod take? How much does it rain? And he's fairly confident, he runs Green Cambridge, that putting down sod should take if we get it in soon enough, because there's enough rain usually in like April, May, and June, that we should have enough of a window for that to work. The soil that we priced out was a half soil, half compost, which significantly aids in creating an ecosystem that's sustainable and suitable for growing grass. Ben, we used Wagon Wheel out of Lexington for all of our pricing. You can go onto their website and they've got a lot of different ground cover options. They're a local business. But we started looking at it at the perspective of like, how cheap can you possibly do it? And it came out to about like 20 grand for just the materials. So we went, well, if we got a contractor to do it, it would probably take about 4 days for them to push the dirt around and put sod on top. We have a contractor, we called them, they said they could be around in like 2 weeks. But we also talked to Green and Open Somerville and said, well, what if we did this with volunteers? Could we access the deep paving group from Green and Open, get 40 people there, buy them pizza and water and whatever they wanted to, and see if we could like really kind of Somerville the hell out of this and like activate it with volunteers. And that's something that like Renee from Green and Open was very excited about. So like, I mean, there's cost savings there too. It's just trying to find the amount of time to get people together to do that. You'd probably be advantaged to have a contractor, have that contractor show us how to do it and work with them with volunteers so that it gets done faster. But I mean, I think our expectations are not that it's the best lawn, just that it's better than what's there. And this process might take 5 years to get through like an eminent domain, RFP and all that. And it's something that like could really be like put a sign in the back of it that just says, please remember this is temporary, so that people don't like feel like they like that it's a permanent part of the community, because we all want the same thing here. We don't want to be sidetracked by having a lawn. But a lawn could be great for next year if we don't get funding for Culture House. We could put events on it. We could do a lot of stuff. So like, that's kind of like what our kind of like picture was, like, rather than throwing out a rug or a turf, like let's build some benefit. Let's take advantage of it. Let's try to get some better drainage.
Sorry, 1 second.
I know
Rachel,
I'm
were you
good.
gonna say
I
something?
see Rachel with her hand up.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, Matt, this is helpful feedback for us to consider. I think and this is why I was talking about that there are multiple layers to it. And I want to say also, this is not a decision that economic development gets to make. We are working very closely with the engineering department, Department of Public Works, the Public Space and Urban Forestry team, and of course, Culture House as our experts and how to roll out something on a quick timeline to navigate this. Because part of this challenge is there's that technical piece, and then there are these other layers, and one of those other layers is this question of, Councilor Kling brought up procurement. There is the procurement is not the top concern we've got at the moment. It's more about, how are we working through our engineering layers? How are we working through public space and urban forestry? How are we making sure that this is consistent with what we are expecting of ourselves? And then there are the other layers that sort of build from that, right? Then there's just, okay, given all those layers of how we would make this happen, can we make it happen in time to actually deliver something this year where the programming can happen? And then there's the question of, okay, what is the maintenance responsibility going to look like? How are we going to transfer this into the city's work plan when it comes to public works? We've been going through these kinds of questions in a lot of different projects that are ARPA funded. And so there are some things that we know already. One is, it being public property, working with private sector and also volunteers, there's a lot of navigating there that's very complex. We need to be sure that we are syncing up with all of our unions and that everyone in DPW is on the same page about what can be done and what can't be done by someone who is not a union staff member, because this is public property that is maintained by our union staff. So there are these, it gets complex very quickly, to the point of where Ben and I are trying to navigate this, how much of our time should go into this conversation? How deep do we go on this front versus trying to have something that is actually delivered so that we can do programming with Culture House this year? And we're sort of wrestling with this.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I do want to reiterate, like, the feedback is heard and we are talking about feasibility of it. It's just that, like, these are the feasibility questions that we're coming up against and trying to navigate, but we hear the desires from the neighborhood council. Matt, is your hand still up, or?
Oh no, I was gonna turn it down. Thank you. Thank you again. Like I definitely appreciate that, like, you're considering it and that you're trying to navigate the web of being in the city and all of these items. It's definitely complicated. It's definitely worth it in, I think, a lot of our minds. So we really appreciate it.
Are there any other thoughts from CAC members, either about that piece of the conversation, about the ground covering part that we just talked about, or just anything else that was shown this evening? Cool. Okay, not seeing any other hands. Awesome. Rishika, thank you so much for coming and presenting on this. Yeah, excited to kind of narrow in on a design in the next few weeks. And then, as I have said, as a city staff member who works at City Hall, truly, city staff are very excited as well to see things on this space. So, a lot of investment in it. Cool. Anything else, Rishika, from you?
No, thanks for having me, and also please feel free to reach out if you want to talk about anything else about the site and the activation. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, the one other thing I will notice that if anybody, as we're starting to talk more about programming, if anybody has specific organizations that you want to make sure are connected with Culture House, please feel welcome to either send their contact information to me and I can share it with Rishika, or however we can get in touch. As Rishika mentioned, a lot of people have already been reaching out just based off of the initial Instagram and website setup. So that's been very exciting to see. Or also, like, if y'all are parts of any organizations that would like to do programming here, keep that in mind. All right. Thank you, Rishika. Okay, let me bring my screen back up. Can you see this again? I can't see any affirmatives. Great, thank you, Rachel. Okay, so the other piece that I wanted to check in on, and this is going to be a quicker part of this conversation, just regarding the urban renewal conversation that we started last month and we have talked about continuing in May. As I'm preparing materials for that meeting, I wanted to just check in on if there were any other parts of the urban renewal process that maybe we talked about or referenced last time that you want to make sure we're answering, or if you have any questions about the parts of those processes you want to make sure we're answering or thinking about how to answer next time, just to give a space to that. So you can also send anything over email ahead of time as we're preparing. Last time people had questions, as simple as just a refresher on the role of the redevelopment authority, and so what it would mean to be giving any recommendation to the redevelopment authority, how the value for eminent domain is set, the time frame for using urban renewal, how the use of urban renewal would be coordinated with development of a city on land. So any of those sorts of questions, if maybe you've been mulling things over since last time, just wanted to give a moment to ask about that during this meeting as we look ahead to that conversation in May. Also totally fine if not. I know it's kind of a strange framing. It's mostly just, I know we talked about a lot of big topics last time, so if there was anything that was kind of percolating, but feel welcome to send anything ahead of the next meeting. I'm going to try to be framing things in a way that, makes people feel informed as they're thinking about any recommendation or decision.
So again, I know I won't be at the next meeting. So is there a vote that, and will I have an opportunity to kind of vote beforehand, or how will that work?
Yeah, so I did look into I'm not sure how voting outside of a meeting would work. We could talk, we could connect more on that over email. I know we had talked about the way that recommendations are often made if people come to a point of wanting to make a recommendation in May. The way that is normally communicated is through a letter. So if, we're looking at a letter or some written piece of recommendation or feedback that summarizes different ideas, I think that's definitely something that we could send to a CAC member that was not in attendance to give any feedback to that written piece. I feel like it kind of lends itself to that. I did also look into, I spoke last time thinking that there was a quorum requirement for the CAC. It is not that technical. So generally, as I mentioned, the group operates off of any letter would note points of consensus, points of non-consensus to make sure that that's all reflected for the redevelopment authority. There is no quorum that needs to be present for that. I think generally we've tried to make sure there's a good critical mass of CAC members if a decision like that is being made. So I think we're still kind of operating more of a rule of thumb. There was sort of a question last time of do we need to make sure 7 people are in attendance? And it's not that technical. So sorry for misspeaking on that last time. Diana?
Yeah, since you're asking for questions about urban renewal, I mean, I haven't had enough time to think about it, but one just popped into my head regarding the timing of if we do recommend urban renewal on the mobile site, the timing of how that would work versus the Homan site. It would be nice if the, if the mobile goes through urban renewal and then eventually there's an RFP for development of the Homan site. I'm wondering, I assume it's true that the RFP could also provide guidelines for what the community and the city wants to see on the mobile site, as well as the Homan site itself. So there could be a unified set of goals for the two properties considered together, since that's part of the major benefit of including mobile is that you could look at, connectivity and open space and everything like that together. So it sounds like with everybody, Rachel and Ben nodding, that we would be able to address both sites in the RFP.
Yes.
Even if it's a separate urban renewal process. Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be, and again, we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about sort of ways beyond urban renewal to maybe achieve that. So kind of like laying out what the goals are in different tools, urban renewal being one of them that could achieve that. But I think, yes, the goal that has been kind of expressed in the past is the use of urban renewal to then hopefully have some sort of coordination between the home and slot and the mobile station, if that were to be the tool that were used.
Okay, yeah, and I understand also that there's also a benefit from just setting up the opportunity to have urban renewal and then not necessarily needing to exercise it, but just having that set up as an option can help kind of motivate various development scenarios.
Right. Yeah, that was, Counselor. Oh, sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, I think that'll be a good topic for discussion in May. Also.
Definitely. I was just going to say, Councillor Klingon spoke a bit about that last meeting, but yeah, that's definitely something we can touch on again. Are there any other questions at this moment? And again, if you're thinking of things over the next few weeks, please feel welcome to send them. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. The one other thing that I did want to mention on this is that when we were talking about May, that fourth Thursday when we would normally host this, I'm going to be out of the office, and I didn't realize that when we were talking about it. But I think I'm just going to send out a survey to find another time. Maybe there's 5 Thursdays in May, so maybe just looking to that week after. But I will send out a message about that to make sure there's still a time that works. Cool. Okay. Want to shift into seeing if there are any updates from CAC members about the neighborhood. So anything that you would like to share, make sure other CAC members or other people watching know about, please feel welcome to use this space. Okay, not seeing any other hands. Sorry, one second. So with that, I can shift us into the second public comment period. So again, we have 2 members of the public with us this evening. If anyone would like to make a comment either on the topics that were discussed this evening or similar to that sort of update space that we have, if there's just any updates that you want to share, questions, please feel welcome to ask them. And I'll give a little bit of time for people to raise their hand. Matt, I see your hand up.
Hey, Ben, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. Urban renewal, would that just be limited to the mobile site, or are you guys going to explore other parcels in the area?
Yeah, so previously the conversation has been limited to the mobile station within the CAC conversation. Anytime that urban renewal in general is considered, there is one of the questions being what sites would this actually be applied to? So I don't want to put like a hard limit if CAC members are interested in talking about other spaces, but generally the conversation in the past has been focused on the mobile station.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Are there any questions from anyone else? Okay, sounds good. I think we can end 15 minutes early this evening. Thank you for all the engagement and especially all the feedback about what we would like to see in this temporary activation. Going to try very hard, and Culture House is trying very hard to make sure that it's something that does reflect what people want to see here. So always appreciate that time. Great. And as I said, if you have any questions in the meantime before that next meeting, please feel welcome to reach out, but I will send out a survey to find another time to meet in May outside of that fourth Thursday. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Good night.